We're getting near the end of 2015, but we're not done yet with the 20th anniversary celebration of the PlayStation 1. On our third and final episode of this block, we will once again dive into the nostalgia well to dig up our personal, most memorable games, for better or worse. What do we have left? Listen in and find out. You might be surprised. It's more PlayStation next on Downloadable Content. Welcome to Downloadable Content. I'm Brian, and we have Ron.
Hey, everyone.
And we have Gabe. Welcome back.
Hi there.
Apparently 2 episodes hasn't driven you away, and now you're back for the 3rd.
Yeah, who would have thought? But then again, 3's a charm, so maybe this will be it.
Maybe it'll be it. We'll find out. So, yes, we're going to be talking some more about the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the PlayStation 1's release. Before we dive into this block of games that we're going to talk about, just want to remind all of you out there, every single episode of Downloadable Content can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. You can get a hold of us in a variety of ways. Facebook.com/DLContent, at Twitter @DLContent, Tumblr, dlcpodcast.tumblr.com, and of course you can always email us at dlcontent1@gmail.com. So there you have all of the different ways to get downloadable content into your ears. Just make sure you clean them out thoroughly once you're all said and done. So yes, we are going to pick up where we left off. No Shanna this time to grace us. She's usually our PlayStation and our Sega fangirl. If we have Doug as our resident Captain N, Shanna could be our Sega and PlayStation crazy person, but she's not here for this one, alas. So we'll just have to press on. Just have to press on without her. So, before I open the floor to you two, I just want to start off by acknowledging the elephant in the room, because we've avoided it for 2 episodes, and I think since this is going to be the last of our PlayStation block for this year, I just want to briefly acknowledge, but not spend all episode on it, because we spent 5 episodes on this franchise. It's Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 were on the PlayStation 1. Let's just get this out of the way.
Let's just get the elephant out and just blast it in the head.
But poaching's illegal, Ron.
Yeah, it's debatable, but continue.
Disclaimer: Downloadable Content does not condone any sort of poaching bullshit. Okay. There are no wild elephants in America.
It's because we hunted them all. That's right. Remember, Brian?
I wasn't around during those wonderful days in the 90s where mastodons roamed America.
But you'll be around for when the mastodons roam Fallout, or not Fallout, the new Far Cry game.
It's
the new Far Cry game. You can hunt mastodons.
Yes,
all you want.
I hunted down elephants in 1991 with my NES Zapper. But yes, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, just wanted to briefly touch on them because, to be fair, Final Fantasy 7 was my introduction to the Final Fantasy franchise, and for many people, it was their introduction to the franchise. And
for many people, it was their introduction to RPGs in general.
Yes, absolutely. And while graphically it may not hold up well at all,
Hence why it's getting remade.
That's why it's getting remade after almost 20 years of Square going, there's no demand for this.
There's no way we'll ever make a remake of Final Fantasy VII. What do you mean this tech demo that we made back in like 2007 for the PlayStation 3? There was a tech demo. It wasn't us actually working on a remake. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
as they shoved their paperwork of said remake under the bed hastily.
Yeah, Oy. So there was no demand for it, yet they kept spitting out PC port after PC port after Steam port after PlayStation Network. Yeah, bullshit. Anyway, so yes, this game was one of my, and probably for many people, one of the most memorable games for this system. It definitely spurred. It was one of the. It wasn't. I don't think it was the first RPG I ever played, but it was certainly one of the first. And it really got me interested in the series, and very interested, so that when I got to play 8, a little disappointed, but still somewhat enjoyable.
8 was a steaming pile of shit.
Yeah, it was...
Oh, you guys are going to hear from me in a minute on that.
So, Final Fantasy VII, great. 8, not so much. 9 was gorgeous.
Oh, hell yeah.
9 was gorgeous. That was, for many Final Fantasy fans, 9 may have been the last truly great Final Fantasy in the series. That's a matter for open debate, which we're not going
to... We won't get into it. I have my own opinions on that.
Alright, but also keep in mind that the PlayStation was very well suited. If you guys remember, a lot of ports of older 16-bit games made it to the PlayStation. It was here where finally Square fixed the Final Fantasy numbering system in North America,
and yet continued to ignore Final Fantasy III.
For the longest time,
until the DS.
Which never came out till the DS. Weird.
Until the DS, but you know, it was the PlayStation 1 where we finally got, with the exception of 3, 1 through 9.
Yeah.
Where they finally released it, and it was honestly thanks to that, because at that point I didn't own a Super Nintendo or an NES anymore after that, so I couldn't go back to get those original consoles. So
admittedly,
you mean you didn't have the... Sorry, I gotta stop talking over you guys.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Admittedly, the said ports of Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6 were terrible because the ATB worked a lot better on a cartridge than it did on a CD.
Loading
screens. Case in point, Final Fantasy 6's when you have to talk to everyone in the Magitech Empire capital, like the soldiers and stuff. Like if you talk to all of them on the console, it's a little close, but you can do it. On the disc, it's damn near impossible. Like you have to talk to everyone, and you have to go in ahead of time knowing who you're going to talk to, avoiding the ones that do combat, and then if you have time, going to kill the ones in combat, because the combat screen by itself would take 15 seconds of loading into and out of, which would eat up most of it.
Miserable.
But even so, despite the discrepancies between the cartridge and the PlayStation port, it was these ports that allowed me to really fall in love with the franchise, because now I could play 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and finally get to play arguably some of the greatest RPGs, the greatest games that I have ever played, but especially with 4 and 6.
Absolutely.
And it made that console all the more memorable to be able to, even though 4 and 6 obviously are Super Nintendo games originally, to me they are PlayStation titles. That's where I first played them, and they're some of the finest written and musically scored video games I have ever played. And you know, thank you very much, Square, for bringing all of those to the PlayStation. So that is my take on Final Fantasy. If we want to have any last thoughts on Final Fantasy
Oh,
before we move on.
I absolutely, because I've been a little quiet because you guys are all trashing Final Fantasy VIII and
your opinion is wrong, but you're allowed to have it. I'm just
in either the second or the first part of this. Tanya also trashed 8, and I understand there are plenty of issues in terms of gameplay, but in terms of here's my bullet point list for Final Fantasy VIII. First of all, it has one of the absolute best intros of any game that I've ever played. It's just an amazing moment in my personal experience with all the video games I've ever played. Just that opening video that brings you in, and with that amazing score, the choral orchestration and all of that, which is admittedly kind of a throwback to the One-Winged Angel song, final battle, but to open with that for starters. But then, in addition to that, as you go through the story, more and more of that intro video begins to make sense. And also, on top of that, it ties the story together and becomes an actual moment in the story later on when time begins to get compressed. And it's my big thing about Final Fantasy VIII is how much I was able to ultimately relate to the characters, even Squall, who's, brooding archetype. How each one of them, you get to see their personal heartbreak, even though predominantly it shifts focus to Squall and Renoa super heavily. You get to see, moments for each and every one of them where they're faced with their own humanity and existential crises. And you get that a little bit you get that a lot with Cloud in 7, but then most of the rest of the characters are like, all right, here we are. Whereas I think one of the most for instance, Irvin, who is from Galbadia. I said I was going to do a bulleted list. I'm sorry, I lied. I'll wrap this up, though, quickly.
Your spirited defense of Final Fantasy VIII.
My spirited but disjointed. Yeah, I'm like a politician who came without his notes or something.
So every politician?
Yeah, what? but yeah, anyway, the moment where you realize that Irvin couldn't shoot Edea, the sorceress, which was his absolute goal, which would have solved a hell of a lot of problems. The moment you find out that the reason he didn't shoot her is because he's from a garden that doesn't use Guardian Forces, and Guardian Forces take away memories, which is in and of itself a higher level of intricacy in terms of storytelling than most of the other games get into in terms of the cost of using something out of body to enhance yourself. There's a cost for that, and you sacrifice your memories of the past for being able to junction to these Guardian Forces and use magic and gain power through that way. And because he hasn't, he remembers that the person he's supposed to kill is the person who raised him as a child, and none of his teammates, no matter how adamant or intelligent they are, remember that because their memories were lost. And here's the last thing, and this is one of the most impressive characters to me in all of Final Fantasy, Auron being another one, because, to jump quickly, because of what he goes through in terms of cheating death or whatever you want to call it. is Adia, who essentially you find out realizes that one day she will become evil and sets up, along with her husband, an organization to train people to kill her. I mean, there are very few characters in any video game that I've ever played who have that depth and complexity. And there are certain things about Final Fantasy VIII that are just deeper than anything else, and for that reason alone, I can't stand by and hear it called a steaming pile of shit. Combat is screwy, yes. There's certain parts that are frustrating or whatever, okay, but it is a wonderful story with really compelling characters, and ultimately, growing up, video games were my books and my movies more than anything else, and it still stands out as one of my favorite stories that I've ever played through. So.
Okay. And the reason,
Mr. Goldie, you have 2
I
minutes to
rebuttal.
You have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay, so the Adia setting up seeds to help kill her when she eventually becomes possessed by the sorceress power, or Ultimacia, basically. That's fine. That's cool. That's a nice little story plot. The issue is that the story leading up to all the things that you said happened, you don't find out about most of that until disc 3. Whereas the major plot point you've learned about concerning Squall or concerning Cloud, like most of the major plot points in all the previous Final Fantasies, you learned like maybe midway through the game, or you at least had a concise story. Like you had a story that you could believe and you could lead and was leading you out to a certain point until they threw the whammy what a twist at you for most of the Final Fantasies. I.e., Cloud not actually being Cloud, World of Ruin occurring in Final Fantasy VI, Zidane being from another planet in 9.
Right.
Like, those things, like, you were led along by the story because the characters were engaging and they had motivations that they had voiced beforehand of, like, why they want to deal with Sephiroth, or why they want to kill Kefka, or why they want to continue exploring Kuja and stopping the mist in 9. Whereas with 8, all you're led to believe is that you need to kill Adia, who is causing all this dumb shit. Okay, so like, here's your bad guy, and then you find out, hey, she's not actually bad. It's just someone possessing her that's causing her to do this stuff. And then you're kind of like, okay, that sort of makes sense. But then, like,
I understand what you're saying also, but I mean, the nature of the story is such that you're not going to find out the things that you're talking about until later, because as far as I'm concerned, they were trying to mimic the unraveling of time as you play the game, and, maybe the obvious response to that is, yeah, time sure did unravel while I was playing that game. But, I mean, there's so much in terms of what is carried on through generations in terms of Squall and Renoa to Laguna and Julia's relationship. What is, lost and then discovered as you revisit, a past that you've forgotten, and all sorts of existential things, I guess, that really have always resonated with me. And I don't want to, I get, you guys have spent so much time talking about it before. I want to make it known that there are people who do really appreciate, a lot of the story that I'm not even getting into at the moment. But like I said, I didn't have time to prepare better for this, but I will also say Final Fantasy 9, then 8, then 7 for me, in terms of the PlayStation games. I loved 7, I played the hell out of it, but ultimately in terms of the depth of story and gameplay combined, I liked 9 the most, and then 8 I liked the story enough to forgive the clunky aspects of it. So that's just my stance.
And that's fine. I mean, there's the gameplay in 8 was to me so clunky that it detracted so much for me.
Yeah, like for me, what I remember most about 8 was the music. That was actually about it. I really liked 8's music.
Yeah.
The combat system was really clunky, like, horrendously clunky. Like, what the hell are you thinking, clunky? And then the characters were, by and large, very, like, teenager angst. Lots of teenager angst. I got the feeling out of most of the characters. And
Well, they're all teenagers.
Yes, I understand that, but like I was playing 8 as a teenager, and I was going, this is a lot of angst even for me. Like, what the hell's going on here?
And Selfies has just had way too much coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then she also sees her home garden destroyed in a missile launch that she does everything in her power to prevent.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's certain justifications. I mean, some of the characters have valid reasons for being angsty. Selfie just saw her home get blown up. Like...
And she has a great depth of character to manage to pick herself back up and lead the, the reconstruction charge and to help everyone. And
yeah, that's fine. But like, when Squall is literally being like,
oh, I'm not defending Squall.
Yeah, Squall is whining and being a bitch, saying, "Why the hell do I have to listen to this 8-year-old, like, brown-haired, blue-dressed chick boss me around?" Like, because that's your goddamn job, because she paid you for it. You can shut your mouth until she gives you the money, and then when she gives you the money, you can leave or slap her in the face or whatever the hell you want. But until then, you do your goddamn job instead of just constantly sassing her and back talking to her.
Yeah.
So, Gabe, you should have joined downloadable content sooner. Then we could have had it out over Final Fantasy VIII.
Oh yeah, if you were here for the 789 discussion, we would have had a good half hour at least of just arguing over how good or bad 8 was.
As it stands, I said I didn't want to spend 20 minutes on Final Fantasy.
And here we are.
And we've spent 20 minutes on Final Fantasy. So...
Well, it was an elephant, and I think we've covered it now.
I think we've covered it. Now you can illegally poach it. So thank you for your spirited defense, and I still have no intention of playing Final Fantasy VIII ever again. But
that's not my intent to make you do that.
Yeah. So, be that as it may, let's move on. We have acknowledged the elephant in the room. Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, very memorable on the PlayStation 1. Moving along, I have acknowledged the elephant in the room, so Ron, let's have a game from you.
Alright, I'm going to talk about another RPG, which is actually kind of interesting considering that Final Fantasy, like the Super NES, was always the one that was considered like the RPG console, but most of the more memorable games on the PlayStation 1 were RPGs, so
Super Nintendo really did well with RPGs, but I think the PlayStation just expanded that. I think it became like this golden era.
Yeah, like if you're an RPG fan, like the Super Nintendo, the PS1, that 10 years or so was like
were amazing.
Were amazing compared to the comparatively
now.
Yeah, like mediocre. And I'm being, like, as generously kind as I can.
Now, where JRPGs are never?
Like, arguably the only good JRPG come out since... I'm saying Final Fantasy X was mediocre to, like, acceptably good. Like, since 10, the only good one that's come out is probably Kingdom Hearts.
That's fine. I mean, you could also make an argument that Xenoblade for the Wii. I thought.
Yeah, Xenoblade 2. Xenoblade
that was excellent. Lost Odyssey for the Xbox 360.
I would say Xenoblade was fine. But like that's like the only other notable one that I can think of off the top of my head. But to get
We're
back
talking in terms of JRPGs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
To get back on point, Star Ocean: The Second Story. This was actually a sequel to Star Ocean. What they called? Originally, it was just simply called Star Ocean. It was a Super Nintendo game that never got released in North America because
reasons.
It follows the story of Claude C. Kenny, who is the son of the main hero from the first game. This is basically like a 20-year skip, basically. The first game happened, the father now becomes like a wizened old general of a starship, and he brings along his bratty 20-year-old son to basically make sure that he's not thrown to the wolves on his first...
Oh, man, I hate it when my heroes do that.
He's trying to look out for his son, not make sure that his son isn't thrown to the wolves in his first assignment out in deep space, and 5 minutes later he teleports himself off a planet. He travels halfway across the galaxy to a different planet and gets mistaken for the hero of light. Oopsies.
Well, you see, I mean, there was what the hell was the name of that kid in Chrono Trigger who was, parading about as the hero?
And then said, "No, I'm not. I just found the badge off of this frog that was drinking his ass off in the tavern."
Yeah.
He gets mistaken for the hero of light because he uses something called a sword of light, which is what the girl who finds him, the girl is called Raina, for those who care. She calls the weapon a sword of light. In actuality, he was using a laser pistol. They mistakes that for the sword of light, which is like this mythical weapon that's supposed to like save the the race on this planet. But you eventually adventure across the planet, finding out, hey, there's something really messed up on this planet with the monsters on it, because they're becoming increasingly violent and increasingly more powerful. And it all revolves around this thing that they call the sorcery globe. Mind you, this is like a backwater, like medieval-ish planet where they barely have people that know astronomy, much less like industrial age stuff. And you have this guy who's trying very, very hard not to reveal said technology to like the populace. And he's like, okay, there's something going on here that is much more advanced than what should be occurring. Maybe I can use this to call for help or get off the planet. And it eventually ends up being that the meteorite, the sorcery globe, is actually this this ancient evil that was sealed away. And the ancient evil gets out and then blows up the planet you're sitting on.
Oh, joy!
You get transported off the planet at the last second by some other, like the 10 wise men, who are like the old people from like the previous planet that used to be there, and they say, "Hey, now the bad guys are back. You assholes need to go seal it because we lost the power to do so."
This is like bordering on space opera.
It is meant to be a space opera. So, you eventually succeed. And eventually you yourself get rescued from what happened. You do a bit of time rewriting because somewhere along the way your dad showed up in the ship and got blown up 5 seconds later. So you save his life and the good lives of everyone on the crew on the ship, and then you save the planet by basically rewriting history so that it never got blown up in the first place.
So for you, Ron, what made this game memorable for you enough so that you're bringing it up here?
Okay,
because I've never played it.
Okay, so there's 2 things, actually 3 things. First was the combat system, which was a mix of like an active time battle because you could see the bars loading up for people above their head. There was also a unique like combo system where as you use more skills, they would get stronger, and then they would eventually unlock into more skills. But this also let you like combo moves together so that, say for example something was weak to fire but resistant to physical damage, if you hit the monster while like you were in the animation of a fire spell, it would ignore the physical resistance and you could attack it with a physical attack, and your physical attack would do the normal damage it would normally do.
Interesting.
So it was. I'm not sure if that's a coding error or actually something that was meant to be. The other things were that everyone had various specialties in terms of like crafting skills, and getting some of the best items in the game required you to do said crafting. And the last thing was that there was a lot of characters in the game. Memory serves, there were like 20 playable characters.
Oh wow! So it like takes a page out of Chrono Cross.
Yeah, but not all of them were recruitable. If you recruited some of them, you couldn't recruit the others. Like for example, there's you also had the option of playing as Claude or as Reyna. If you played as Claude, you could not get Reyna's like best friend and like the analog to what Claude's skill set was. But if you played as Reyna, you would get Claude and your friend, but you wouldn't get some other people. So your party eventually boiled down to like 7 people or 8 people, but the 7 or 8 would vary depending upon who you played and who you recruited and when you recruited them.
So it's Mass Effect sort of took a similar page, huh? Where like you can make certain decisions and you either get the one character or the other, but you can't get both, because either you have to kill one of them or banish them or whatever, or you can completely miss some characters, like in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, so over the course of the game, I'm looking at the Wikipedia article, and I actually didn't know this. There are 86 possible endings, all varying, all like little like small variances based upon like certain events you did during the game or how close you got to particular players or characters in the game. Because you have the relationship points in the game, and if the person you were friendly to fell in battle, you would get a major stat boost for like a couple seconds or so. Just because like your friend was so raged that their friend just got knocked out that you just like rage out and just try and beat the shit out of the guy that did it.
That's really neat.
It did get ported over to the PSP. I believe it did get a bit of a graphical update and some anime cutscenes added in. So that's always an option for people who are looking to get it. It was a good game, I think. Probably 30 to 40 hours of gameplay, if memory serves.
What's the name of this game again?
Star Ocean: The Second Story.
Star. Yeah, I
believe it's called Second Revolution on the PSP port.
Yeah, is that where when you're fighting, you already said this, I'm sorry, but where you're sort of like running around a whole lot and
in combat, you can move around.
Control the movement of one person, and then everyone else sort of moves. With you.
Yeah. You move your own. You can set up the combat so that you can move yourself around, or you can move, or you only move whenever you do a particular like attack option.
Yeah. I did play part of that. Then I played up to a certain tower where you're supposed to go in and stop. I don't even know what was happening at the time. Everything else had been like, all right, this is difficult, but then I went into this tower and my team just got annihilated over and over again until I just couldn't do it. I don't know. It's one of the first games I ever just gave up on just because I had other things.
There were certain points in the game where the difficulty level jumped considerably with little to no indication that it was going to be doing that.
Yeah, that was rough. But cool, so I actually know what we're talking about. And they had like a food system, didn't they?
Yes, you could craft food, and I think the food would either heal you or give you like impermanent stat increases.
Yeah.
I think.
That sounds right.
Alrighty. Well, that I did try to get into another of the Star Ocean games later on for PS2.
That one, yeah.
Yeah,
At the time, yeah, that's a little not good.
that's it. Okay. I think I only got a couple of hours into it and never picked it up again. So
Yes, the third one was like tolerable at best, and the fourth one that was on the 360 was like
We don't mention that one or invite
it was
parties.
not very good. The concept behind it was solid, but the execution was very, very poorly done.
Yeah, I remember people being excited and then the huge letdown on that one because it just did not do what they thought it was going to.
Yeah, like the idea behind the fourth one, Brian, was that you were going to be that Earth was like basically covered in nuclear winter, and that they were sending out like spaceships to try and find a new planet so people could like live on while they waited out the nuclear winter. And people thought like, hey, maybe it's going to be like a sort of like sci-fi RPG where you're going to be exploring planets, looking for like habitable planets for humans to live on, or maybe figure out how they can fix the nuclear winter.
Mm.
And it ended up being like, within 5 minutes, your ship is blown up and you're stranded on a planet, and you have to figure out a way to get off the planet.
Yeah, all right.
Bad move.
Nothing major then.
Yeah, like literally stereotypical. Like it's actually stereotypical for the Star Ocean series in general. Is like, yeah, you're you begin in like a starship or something like that, and within the first 20 minutes, you're gonna get blown up and stranded on some backwater planet in the middle of nowhere that somehow has this mysterious magic on it that lets you get away with doing a lot of bullshit, and eventually said bullshit's going to be able to save your ass and get you back to your technology world.
So again, my mind is jumping to Mass Effect in terms of like things that Star Ocean was shooting for but didn't hit. In terms of later games, Mass Effect totally hit those. But again, that's not a PlayStation game at this point, so I don't know why I keep bringing it up. It's just reminding me of it.
No, that's fair. Alrighty then. So we've had the Final Fantasy, we've had Star Ocean. Gabe, your turn.
I thought you were. I guess you brought up Final Fantasy. I thought that was sort of a communal thing. I was gonna say I talked so long about 8. All right. Okay.
That was just your rebuttal to my constant bashing of the game. So.
All right.
You're up.
Okay. Well, since we're on the topic of RPGs that I love, and you guys mentioned, a lot of people first came to RPGs by way of Final Fantasy. My first RPG was Breath of Fire for the not PlayStation, for the Super Nintendo, and both Breath of Fire 3 and 4 were released on the PS1. I've grown to appreciate more in retrospect Breath of Fire 3, but ultimately the one that I really want to talk about is Breath of Fire 4, because it does a lot of things. Again, when I play games, I especially focus on story and character development, and it always helps when the rest of the mechanics are working well, which is, again, why Final Fantasy IX stands out so much to me in this era also. But Breath of Fire 4 is another one for me where all the mechanics that they built into the game are working very smoothly, from combat to fishing to sand flying, which was just a fun mini game, and the worst thing I could say about it is that every now and then you get into a bad camera angle that you can't rotate out of, But those are few and far between, and there have been a lot of games since that have had a lot worse problems in terms of camera. But in terms of story, it's another one where it just has always stayed with me, because you start at the very beginning. You start with Nina, the perennial female character in the Breath of Fire series. There's always a Princess Nina, and there's always a Ryu, the dragonborn main character. And Nina and Cray, who's this cat guy from the Warren tribe, he's a big bulky dude, are traveling across the desert in search of Nina's sister, the princess of their area. And all the Windians have wings, and that's just a subplot throughout the different games, that with every generation their bloodline gets thinner, and now they can't. They used to be able to transform into birds, and now they can just hover in the air for a little bit, and that's about it. But anyway, it starts out pretty simple. They're trying to find Nina's sister, because she's gone missing on an sort of an ambassadorial sort of trip, and Nina goes out into the desert because their sandflyer gets crashed into by a dragon, and discovers Ryu, who's just been born essentially out of thin air, because this great emperor from like 1,000 years prior, this great dragon emperor, when I don't remember exactly how it happened, but he went into a deep sleep and he woke up, and this is the part of the story that's a little hazy, but he comes out of this deep sleep, but his spirit or his soul is divided among two bodies, and that's where Ryu, the main protagonist other than Nina, comes into play. But the other part is Folu, who is essentially this emperor god dragon character who had expected to come back to great, praise and worship, and to resume his rule, but instead he's attacked by the empire that he founded, because times have changed. We don't need a dragon emperor anymore. We don't want you here. And he goes on the run, and his view of humanity gets progressively darker and darker. That's his storyline. Meanwhile, your main characters are off trying to find Nina's sister, and I'm not doing a tremendous job explaining it again, but as the story gets deeper and deeper, this is another situation where there's a lot of moral consequences and huge issues that have to be faced. Like Cray, who I was talking about, eventually has to he's forced to make the decision to kill the person he loves, because she's been horribly transfigured into this creature that's going to destroy, it's essentially going to continue to spread evil across the land in the simplest terms. But his action is not understood. It's barely understood by your main party, and beyond that, the Empire and everybody else, they very nearly put him to death. And it gets really dark at times, and the thing that stands out to me most is the final confrontation, and this is the last thing I'll say at the moment, is you come across Folu finally, after your paths have been coinciding but never crossing, um, he's on the rampage, and you're trying to save, the world essentially from the chaos that it's descending into. And you finally meet up with him, and he talks to Ryu directly, who is the other half of his soul, essentially. And he shows all the things that he thought were good about humanity getting just destroyed in front of him. The empire he built turning their backs on him. The person that nursed him back to health being senselessly killed, I believe, also, which was the last straw for him. And he makes a plea. Essentially, he pleads his case to your character and says humanity's not worth saving. And Ryu addresses him and tells him about all the times he spent with these humans and these people, and how even though they were supposed to be working for the Empire, they realized it was wrong, and there's redemption and hope and whatever on his angle. But ultimately, you see both sides, and then they turn the decision over to you, and you say, okay, because this is where the Folu's spirit is going to merge back together. You have two choices. Is Folu right, or is Ryu right? Is humanity worth saving or not? And if you defy Folu, obviously you have to destroy him in order to assimilate him. But the alternate is accepting that he's right, which immediately turns him into an unstoppable dragon that no matter how hard you try, you immediately have to wipe out all the people you've grown close to as Ryu over the course of the game. Your first act is to destroy the other 5 party members that are now standing in your way from destroying humanity. And that moment alone was just another one of those ones that always sticks with me, and is just such a powerful scene in my head, and just a really, in terms of consequences, the depths of consequences of your choice, they're drastically different.
So I'm just from your description, it just sounds like that overall it was the story that just made this game really memorable for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, the gameplay is great also, and there's a nice little combat system. It's not overly complex, but the gameplay, which, I obviously just outlined a lot of the key points, but there's just so much connection that you develop between the characters and their plights, and it's always stuck with me, and I've played through it a couple times for that reason, and it's one of those old games that I will eventually play again, because it meant so much to me back then, and it still stays with me.
Cool.
I don't know if either of you guys have played it.
I have not.
Sorry for spoiling major plot points, but they're still worth experiencing.
That's all right. I've been told that Breath of Fire is one of those other RPG series I need to get into.
It was all started by Capcom in conjunction with Squaresoft for the first one, too. So they have a good legacy, which they're slowly, what would you call it, Capcomming to death?
They're slowly raping to death, is how I would put that.
But
like, the first 4 Breath of Fire games were pretty good. Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, which was on the PS2, was not good in the slightest.
It had this sort of pre-Dark Souls or Dark Demon Souls concept, though, which I think was better than its actual execution, because I never managed to get through the game, but it's one of those things where dying is incorporated as part of the way you actually progress through the story.
In a weird sense, yeah. But like, for me, I think Breath of Fire is carried on a relatively consistent storyline Some pretty engaging characters. The battle system, by and large, hasn't changed since the the Super Nintendo days.
Right. There's traps in Dragon Quarter and a couple other things, but yeah.
I think the biggest it is a relatively consistent, pretty decent JRPG that you can go back and play and enjoy, and spend 20 hours, 30 hours in it, and be done with it and be like, yeah, I had a good time with this, and continue on with your day. I do like the art style in 3 and 4. It's got that sort of anime looking feel to it, but it's definitely a very it's definitely very styled.
Yeah.
Compared to your Final Fantasies, and
which makes it a little less difficult to look at it after all these years of graphical enhancements.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so I feel like you were working up to a. However,
it's fine. It's just not as good as I think it could have been. Like with Dragon Quarter, I think Dragon Quarter is actually the last one of the series. I don't think they've made one since then.
They've come out with or are coming out with a mobile game.
Yes, they are. Okay, I just looked now. There is a Breath of Fire 6 that has been announced for Android, iOS, and PC. But since it sounds like it's going to be a mobile system, but it's supposed to have been released.
Hello?
It's supposed to have been released fall of 2015.
Yeah.
I would assume that's not.
And Japan only at this rate.
Yeah, but I would suspect it's going to be ported over eventually.
Maybe, but then again, they didn't port the most recent Phoenix Wright's Ace Attorney entry for some terrible reason.
That was Nintendo being a dumbass. That wasn't. Well, actually, that's Capcom and Nintendo being dumbasses, but that's besides the point. But this is the first.
Any bad business decision that involves Capcom, I tend to assume is directly related to Capcom.
Yeah, Capcom as a company right now is they've got one thing keeping them afloat. Literal one thing.
Street Fighter?
Yeah.
I was going to say not Mega Man, but...
Yeah, it's not Mega Man. It's Street Fighter. Street Fighter is the only thing keeping them afloat. If Street Fighter 5 flops, that company is going to be going in the tank.
You mean the 900 versions of Street Fighter 4 is...
Not enough, yeah.
Not enough? Alright. Alright.
Yeah, one last thing before we move on, if we're ready to move on, is just... I didn't mention a lot of plot points in Breath of Fire 4, but when I played through Final Fantasy X, there are a lot of plot points in 10 that my brain immediately went, this happened in Breath of Fire 4. This happened in Breath of Fire 4. Oh, this too. Oh my gosh, that's the same sort of twist. And I can't name specifics right now, because it's been a while and I didn't get to reread the plots. But there are a lot of things that stood out in Final Fantasy X in terms of good plot points that were very similar or identical to Breath of Fire 4, which predated it by a year and a half or so. Which means it was probably already written before Breath of Fire 4 came out, but nonetheless.
Nonetheless, they're still there. Alrighty, so we have approaching an hour here on this first half, so I'll cut it off here. We've talked about this has been an RPG-heavy first half, but...
It won't be for the second half, I can guarantee that.
No, definitely not.
But no, I mean, well, that's, PlayStation 1 we saw some heydays. I mean, we had RPGs, we had pretty much the invention of survival horror. I've got a survival horror game up my sleeve for the second half. So, we've got things to look forward to. So, We will cut to break. You'll have some music. We'll take a look at games with bad polygons, and we will be back. You are listening to the third and final episode of our 20th anniversary celebration of the PlayStation 1. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content, still talking PlayStation 1 on our third and final episode devoted to the 20th anniversary of the PS1. We're all still here. We have all found save points. Everyone is just moving along swimmingly. So we have talked in the first half. We brought up a few games. They were all RPGs, and that's typical. That's fine. The PlayStation 1 was known for RPGs, but it was also known for survival horror. That's when the genre was really first invented and really took off. And we mentioned in the previous episodes, I had brought up Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and two amazing, groundbreaking franchises that, incidentally, I am replaying because I got them on the PlayStation Network, and I'm still waiting for Resident Evil 2 and 3 to get the same sort of HD love that Resident Evil 1 seems to keep getting, but that's a whole different rant. So the game I am going to start the second half with was another survival horror game that might not be known to many of you because it was made by a studio that probably not too many people have heard of. The studio was Callisto Entertainment, and the game is called Nightmare Creatures.
What other games did they make? I guess I could look that up, but I know the name.
They made Nightmare Creatures, Nightmare Creatures 2. They made a game called Fury of the Furries. They made a game called Four Wheel Thunder. They made a game based on the movie The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
Many of their games were published by Activision.
Aha.
So you may have seen them through there because, yeah, Activision was basically their publisher of choice.
Gotcha.
And Nightmare Creatures, this particular game is based largely on Gothic stereotypes, Gothic archetypes. Just in brief, the story takes place. Well, the story begins around the mid-17th century. There was a devil-worshipping cult called the Brotherhood of Hecate. They were doing experiments in London, bizarre experiments to eventually take over the city and then the world. No relation to Ivo Shandor and the Gozer cult.
Are you the gatekeeper?
Oh. Yes, I'm actually a friend of his, but he told me to meet him here.
Thank you.
I like what
Sorry,
you've done.
I couldn't do my Sigourney Weaver voice there, sorry.
Well, I like what you've done with the place. We must prepare for the coming of Gozer. Okay, no, if I start that, I'm going to recite the whole movie. I've seen it that many times.
Just like most of the people in our demographic have seen the movie that many times.
I hope so. Anyway, so they're doing these bizarre experiments, and the Brotherhood had tried to develop an elixir that would give them basically superhuman powers, but in doing so, they did not create that elixir, but instead created monsters. And then they had the bright idea to use these monsters to try to use these monsters as an army. And then Umbrella would get the idea to do the same thing, but with viruses 300 years later. And when they decided to use these creatures as their armies, one of their number, one of the Brotherhood members, set their headquarters on fire.
Whoopsies!
Yeah, that resulted in the First Great Fire of London. And so the game, fast forward about 160 years, now jump to 1834, when London begins to fall victim to evil occurrences, and monster sightings are reported, and we find out that somebody is trying to revive the Brotherhood. A book then is dropped off. The main character, his name is Ignatius, because let's just ram the Christian stereotype right in the face. The book is actually the lost diary of this particular Brotherhood member that set the original headquarters on fire. The book contains the Brotherhood's research. This antagonist, his name is Adam. The one who's trying to revive the Brotherhood, realizes this, kills some people, and steals the book. And it is your job to not only stop Adam, but stop all these monsters as well. So it's a very, very gothic sort of story, and that's kind of what drew me into it, because I wanted to see, having played Resident Evil, having played Silent Hill, the game came out in the United States September 30th, 1997. I had gotten a hold of it a couple of years later. And I was really into survival horror then. I was very curious to see what companies would do with this sort of medium, because we already saw the jump shock horror that was Resident Evil and incorporating mutagenic viruses. Then we saw the psychological, eerie sort of mind fuck that it was Silent Hill. Now we're using gothic stereotypes and seeing what could happen now. And I really liked the story. That was what drew me into it. It's basic combat. It's sort of a bit of that hack and slashy feel. And looking at it now, prior to this episode, I was refreshing myself on on the gameplay itself because it's been 20, almost 20 years since I last touched this game, and because it's not on the PlayStation Network. So the only way I'd be able to play it is if I were to actually hunt down a used copy of the disc, or try to get an emulator for it. But the gameplay, again, basic hack and slash, and watching gameplay videos. I was watching a Let's Play of this game, and this is another one of those games that graphically do not hold up at all.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now. Oh.
Yeah, ooh is right. And after recently playing through Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 again, and remembering that Capcom used the pre-rendered 3D backgrounds, this game does none of that. If you look up a Let's Play of this run, you will see how horrible this game looks graphically.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, ew. I mean, and I thought Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver was bad graphically. This is, oh man. Sharp angles and polygons everywhere.
Yeah, I'm just watching it, and it's like rendering as it goes, so all of a sudden, like, this zombie or whatever creature thing just appears out of nowhere, and
Yep.
it's just...
You don't really have any forewarning.
In that it is not scary, like, because of the detail.
No,
the detail is lacking or something.
I never really got scared by it, but I was just curious to see. And the story did intrigue me enough for me to want to keep going and playing it. I mean, you can... There was something interesting in that game called an adrenaline bar, and you needed to keep it full. Otherwise, if it was empty, you would start losing life.
Mm.
The adrenaline bar was optional, but you can decide to play with that for an added element of drama and tenseness, I suppose. I think Eternal Darkness for the GameCube did it much better with the sanity meter, but we're not talking about the GameCube on this episode. So, but apparently, and I did not know this until reading the Wikipedia article about it, that this game was ported for the N64.
Huh.
But because of the limitations of the cartridge, a lot of the cutscenes and FMVs had to be removed.
Now, how were the cutscenes? Were they any better graphically than?
Well,
looking back, are they good, or are they just as hard to look at?
they're better to look at. They don't. I mean, because it's an FMV, that it's more the characters and everything in them. There's a lot more smoother, a lot more sort of realistic looking. Not the sharp, holy hell polygons that the gameplay, the in-game graphics have. So, because and they also the advantage that the N64 cartridge has, that that overall the game looked more detailed and crisp. Because it was the pixelation and texture warping was not quite so noticeable.
Yeah.
So, and I noticed that too because I owned Resident Evil 2 for both the PlayStation and the N64 at one point, back when I owned both systems. And yeah, the Resident Evil 2 on the N64 looks a bit cleaner.
Yeah.
And that just might be because of what they had to do to fit the game on a cartridge. So, but yes, Nightmare Creatures. This game, I do not know really anyone who's ever played this game. So if any of you out there on the wide world of the internet have played this game, let me know, because again, I think I'm the only one out of my group of friends who's ever played this game, and so. But I enjoyed
as a sequel.
It did have a sequel, but I never played the sequel.
It wasn't well received.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So, That is my opening salvo for the second half. So, Ron, we will go to you again.
So for my game, I'm going to be talking about something completely different from all the RPGs and what Brian talked about. We're going to talk about a fighting game, specifically Guilty Gear.
Ooh, all right.
Okay, for those who don't know about Guilty Gear, it is a 2D sprite RPG. Not RPG. It's not an RPG. Holy crap! No. Yeah, it is a 2D sprite fighting game that was released for the PlayStation 1 in Japan on May 14th, 1998, October 31st, 1998 for North America. It is one of the few true remaining 2D sprite-based games, although you could argue that the most recent outing is not 2D, but we'll get into that later if people actually want to. But the general storyline of the game is that you choose one of 10 characters. For those who care, I had the list of the persons here. Here are the playable characters you can start off with Axel Lowe, Chip Zanuff, Dr. Baldhead, Cliff Anderson, Kai Kisk, May, Mila Rage, Potemkin, Soul Bad Guy, and Zato 1.
That's why I remember this game. Soul
Yes.
Bad
The only time
Guy.
I ever played this, oh my gosh, I just realized I played this in Japan at a
Fighting arcade content.
just a Sega arcade or something. I don't think it's even Sega, but I think it was.
It's Atlas.
Yeah, but I played on one of the cabinets in Japan, and it was really fun. And I always was like, "Oh man, I would like to check that out."
Yeah.
But I didn't realize even that there was one here.
Mm-hmm. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is that this is a fighting game that was wildly different compared to the fighting games that were out previously. Whereas previously you had Street Fighter and Virtua Fighter and Tekken and Mortal Kombat. This one was like a decidedly over-the-top anime-style fighting with like ridiculous characters and ridiculous moves and a bunch of like really intensive like combos and how they link together and literal frame perfect moves that you could only do against certain characters or certain situations. It is a very intensive like skill combat game. There's very little in terms of like oversight in terms of balance. I mean, there's admittedly some characters that are better than others from like a balance standpoint, but there's three main things that I really like about the series in general. First is the individual art style and gameplay of each character. No character plays like the exact same other. You may have characters that share a certain similar thing, like for example, like the Hadoken or projectile. Some characters may have a projectile of some sorts, but they won't be the same comparatively speaking. For example, Kai's projectile is him shooting out like a little bolt of lightning. Whereas Kai Kisk, his projectile is him shooting flames across the ground and like a fire spout towards the enemy. Second is the music. This is a very decidedly like metal rock, like very aggressive, very loud, very actiony soundtrack, which the producer and the creator of Daisuke Ishiwatari is the creator, producer, designer, and composer of the game. He has been the producer, designer, creator, and composer of the game for all of them, and he's like, you can definitely see this guy is like a really big like rock fan, metal fan. As there's a bunch of like Easter eggs and interludes that relate to various metal bands and rock bands of like the 70s and 80s and 90s. The third thing that people will probably remember, even if they don't know about Guilty Gear, they've probably heard of Duel 1, Heaven or Hell, Let's Rock. Am I wrong in that?
It sounds vaguely familiar.
I will try and find a video link, and I'll maybe Brian can splice this audio in. But like, this is like the to give you an idea, like the idea of like how weird metal the series is. But like it's I admittedly did not get into Guilty Gear until the PS2 release of Guilty Gear.
Which is what, XX?
XX, yeah, XX or X2, I think.
Yep.
That was my initial lead into it, because it was XX in Japan, X2 in America, but then Arxis, which was like the actual like developer of the game, like they eventually started doing some of the stuff that Capcom did, but back then it was more so like balance updates than anything else, because it's harder to balance update on a console than it is in an arcade, where you can just update the programming and chipset of the arcades compared to the kind of publish out new discs for updates.
Yeah.
But the newest one, Guilty Gear XRD, is on PS3, PS4. Let's see. I'm looking right now just to double check. Let's see.
Looks like that's it.
Yeah.
It's on arcade, PS3, and PS4.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got an arcade release in Japan, and it got a PS3 and PS4 release here in the States almost a year ago.
Yeah. They have done it, but the reason why I really like the advent of internet and the updating of the they don't have to do as many like re-releases as they did previously, because they're actually smart about how they do releases instead of Capcom. If they're going to do a sequel or something like that, they'll generally do an actual sequel where they update the game and like you pay $15 or something like that, and then you get like more story and more characters, instead of Capcom when they do Street Fighter and they do a re-release where they introduce like maybe one character and you pay like $30 or $40 to get the brand new game. They're gonna do, I believe they're only doing like a $15 DLC. I could be wrong on that. I'm looking it up right now for people.
And as Guilty Gear is not as prolific, shall we say, than Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, because we've got a bunch of Mortal Kombat games, a bunch of Street Fighter games. Guilty Gear, as I see it here, only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major entries.
Yeah, there's Guilty Gear X, Guilty Gear XX, which is Guilty Gear X2 in the state. There's also a bunch of like balance updates for X2.
Yeah, but those aren't like actual full.
Yeah, but they may expand a bit of the story, but not too much of it. Then you have some like side games, like you have Guilty Gear Judgment for the PSP, but they're not actual full entries. The next full entry is called Guilty Gear 2 Overture, which is a wildly different game. Like you have to see Guilty Gear 2 played, and you have to be a fan of it to want to play it. For those who don't know, it is a real-time strategy 3D fighting game.
Huh.
Think about that for a minute.
I have, and my brain is broken. So
okay. And then the next actual story entry is Guilty Gear XRD Sign, which is the
most recent one.
Most recent one, yeah.
So, as it's a fighting game, so you said you were drawn in, and this is Guilty Gear, the original Guilty Gear, memorable to you because it was
The art style.
The art style, and of course that would appeal to you because you're an illustrator.
Yeah, I'm an illustrator. Yes, so like you have very uniquely designed characters. You have a very over-the-top fighting game. The story is actually pretty interesting if you want to read into the story. For those who care, brief rundown of the story. Humanity figures out that magic is real, and they eventually turn magic into technology and things like that. They used magic to create a new race of beings they call gears, and then a war breaks out because gears want something, we don't know what, and their leader says, to get said thing, we need to kill all the humans, and the gears have to follow what the leader said because she is the command gear. She is the one that rules over all other gears. So a 100-year war breaks out. Japan gets nuked off the face of the planet. Most of the, like, Europe and North America, by and large, get reduced to rubble. Most of Africa gets nuked too, I think. Like, a large portions of the world get wildly turned into wasteland because of the war. They eventually kill the command gear, which in the process either kills or deactivates all the other gears in the world. The remaining story from here on out is basically trying to figure out why did this command gear like want to kill all humanity in the first place? Is the command gear coming back? Because if so, oh shit, it took 100 years and basically the entire resources of the planet just to kill her the first time. And then you have like, this mysterious person who is called, I'm not joking here, that man who is going around doing fuck knows what, but it's really, really not good stuff based on the fact that bad guy's sole purpose is to find and kill this one person. I mean, there's a lot more plot in there. Like, if you guys want to, you could look up and read the plot. I would recommend playing the game first, seeing if you like it, and then if you like the characters' personalities and things like that, then go try and read the plot. Because that's a whole other bag of worms that you need to dig through.
Yeah. I just keep getting distracted by the fact that there's a character named Soul Bad Guy. I think that's amazing.
Again, that was like the guy loves his Dice Guy really loves his word puns and throwbacks. Like there's a guy in the game. There's a playable character in the game called Slayer. There's people in the game that have moves like Iron Maiden and Axl Lowe. There's like Guns N' Roses. Like all these like references to like rock bands and metal bands and hair bands of the 70s and 80s. Like they're all interspersed throughout the game in terms of like names of moves or names of characters or things like that.
Is a character in later games on this music. But, yeah, and apparently this is the spiritual ancestor of BlazBlue, which I've also heard I've also heard good things about.
Yeah, it is. BlazBlue is the spiritual successor of Guilty Gear, although now the Guilty Gear XRD has been released. They might become like their own things.
Yeah.
I also I won't mention this. I'll leave this for you guys to figure out on your own. There's a character in the game called Bridget. She is a very interesting character.
Okay. Well, there you go.
In terms of her character, or I see what she looks like, and I will certainly confirm that she's an interesting character.
She kills opponents with yo-yos. She is a bounty hunter, and her backstory is interesting and leads to many interesting reactions from several of members of the male cast.
Gotcha.
But this is, I think many people, I kind of forgot that Guilty Gear was on the PlayStation until I went back and looked and was like, oh, this began on the PlayStation, right? But if you are a fan of like the over the top anime looking fighting style games, Guilty Gear is definitely a game series that I think people will really enjoy. Also, the soundtrack for the games is really good. And like most of the characters have a really good, memorable soundtrack. If not, like there's certain like various songs that get played as certain characters meet it because they have like backstory and history between them. I think one of the more memorable ones that even like non-Guilty Gear fans would have remembered is I mean, I'm just trying to remember the name of it. Still, the name of the song is called "Still in the Dark." It is the song that is played whenever Mila Rage and Zato 1 fight each other, and it has gotten updates in XRD, and I believe there's various like fan reworkings and things like that of the song too. But it is definitely a very good rock like song, even if there is no actual lyrics said.
Huh. Cool. I mean, listening to you talk about it, it definitely hits a lot of the points that I would enjoy. So I'll probably get a chance to check it out one day.
Alrighty. Moving right along then. I remember I played a bit of Guilty Gear X2. That's as far as my involvement with the series. But yes, I do remember just how over the top it was. But in the other way, Mortal Kombat is known for its over the top blood, guts, and gore. Guilty Gear goes in the other direction. So, with that said, let us move on to Mr. Cleveland over there.
All right, here we go.
There you go.
Well, we've done RPGs to death, so not going to return to that. Let's see. I bringing up a sports game seems like dumb. Dumber than the way I just put that. But I really did enjoy FIFA 2002. I thought it was well made, and that's all I need to say about that. But going on to one of the genres which I think you guys mentioned very briefly, but never really talked about with any detail in the previous two episodes. One of the genres that just really came to be during this time was the skateboarding. I know you guys talked about snowboarding a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about Cool Borders 3. That was.
Are you bringing up the entire Tony Hawk's Pro Skater franchise from the PS1?
I mean, how can you not? It was a staple.
That's fine.
At the time, it was that FIFA 2002 or Marvel vs. Capcom. And we already talked fighting games. We already ragged on Capcom, and we keep doing that if we want. But I thought I got to give the nod to Tony Hawk, and especially I think the best one for me, much like for me also with the Twisted Metal series, my favorite one was the second one.
The second one had the hangar level, right?
In Tony Hawk, yeah. You open in the hangar.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think for most people, they will know Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, like the series as a whole, from nothing other than the hangar level. And that and the definitely 90s and early 2000s like punk rock soundtrack.
Yeah, and I'm not like a huge punk rock fan, but it's still a great. I don't dislike it at all, but it's just not the genre that I was most interested in at any point but I always, I could hear a song from that and just get brought right back to it and still enjoy myself, just like with having, random twitchy Tony Hawk flashbacks. And just the series in general was just so laden with great music, excellent gameplay most of the time, pretty neat interpretations of the locales that they brought in, and then so many just outrageous tie-ins between, it was Activision, and they had the rights to Spider-Man and games and stuff like that, so you can play as Spider-Man eventually, and being able to customize your own character was huge for me too, because that was one of the, beyond just naming your character, that was one of the first games for me growing up where I got full on, character creation, where you actually can say, all right, here's my character, here's, it's not incredibly deep, but here's his hair color, here's his name, here's, his style and whatever else, and you could cater it to your own liking, and it really added a personal touch to the series, and any game that you were playing where you can say, all right, hey, this person looks like me and whatever else, and they're doing things that I could never dream of doing because I'm nowhere near that athletic. It was just a super cool experience, and I had tons of fun playing those games with my friends growing up. And yeah, Tony Hawk is pretty cut and dry. There's no deep apocalyptic story behind it or anything like that.
You're just a skateboarder skateboarding on various locales.
It's just a hell of a lot of fun, and there's a part of me that absolutely just appreciates the hell out of it.
I'm my stepbrother for a while. I got to watch him play Tony Hawk a lot, and I too played a little bit of it. I ended up, my focus later on for the GameCube, SSX Tricky. So continuing that whole, snowboarding thing, I was more into those than I was Tony Hawk. But I remember just how popular they were. And you also had, the actual Tony Hawk himself, to back these games up.
And not just him, but a lot of the other skateboarders, really, they did a really good job bringing in the other folks and, recreating their likenesses. And then it was so cool at the end of playing a campaign as a certain character, being able to see the cutscenes at the end that you'd unlock, which were just 4 minutes of the actual person in real life doing all the crazy shit you just made them do in the game, except they can actually do that, to a certain degree. They obviously can't do an endless manual chain or whatever, but just being able to use the board as if it was part of them, and it's just amazing to see that at the end of a game where it's, you sort of feel like you're defying gravity, and then you get to see real people do it at the end of the game. That was always super cool to me.
It just, as opposed to, say, somebody like Madden, who has an entire football series named after him, and he's an announcer
and a coach. He is one of the best coaches in football history, but he's also a giant pile of blubber, I guess. I don't know. That's mean, but what I mean is he's kind of a dick.
Yeah. So, it's. And all the cool tricks you could do in there, and it was It was a nice way to kill. It was occasionally a nice palate cleanser after I had just finished playing a serious RPG.
Yeah, for real.
It was like, okay, let's have something that I don't really have to think about.
Yeah, agreed.
Because
there's also some of the I forget there were some really weird unlockable characters. Like you mentioned Spider-Man. I swear you could play as Darth Vader in one of them.
I think
could be
so.
wrong.
I think that might have been 4 or something, or maybe it was a PlayStation 2.
But there were some like really like weird, like interesting characters you could play as, and they had their own unique moves. Like I remember Spider-Man, you could web something in the middle of the air, and it was a Spidey flip or something like that.
Yeah, you could do that with the skateboard. You'd throw the skateboard out and then bring it back, I think.
if it seems like that, if we're talking about different characters, it feels like Deadpool would be a perfect fit for a game like this. But that's just
yeah. All right, so here's some of them. Right, you have Darth Maul in Pro Skater 3.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of then.
Yeah, Jango Fett in Pro Skater 4 of all things. And then later on, and this is where it gets a little extra weird, after Iron Man, which is, okay, that's cool. Then you can play as Shrek, which is, alright, Shrek. Cool, I guess. I don't know, that just seems like a weird choice to me. But then also, here's another guest appearance that you can have. Call of Duty Soldier in Tony Hawk Pro Skater Underground 2. Just not like, I don't know, I feel like that's not even, that just seems like cheating at that point for some reason. Call of Duty Soldier. I don't know. Take it as you will.
I don't know either. I'm not even gonna touch that. I'm gonna pass.
Me too. So.
For those curious, there was a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 released earlier this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but from what I've read, it was very not good. There was a lot of technical issues with the game.
Ooh. Trying to revive that nostalgia money.
Oh, yeah, looking at these ratings, not so good.
Not so good at all. Youch.
Yeah, they're like they mentioned, like, the nostalgia's there, but there's so many technical issues it's not good.
Yeesh. Alrighty. Alright, well, we have just a little bit of time left, so I'm gonna take the last word here.
Go for it.
I'm gonna take the last word. We didn't mention this in any of the other episodes, and so I think it only fitting that we close with another game in the sort of stealth action sort of category, which was made popular by Metal Gear Solid, but we had this other studio, 989 Studios, by the way.
The Hitman franchise?
Siphon Filter.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. All right, their answer to Metal Gear Solid. Right. That one. The first 3 games were on the PS1, and I really liked the series. It had a pretty decent story without the really occasional suspension of disbelief that Kojima had you experience. Like Psycho Mantis. Anyone ring? This was definitely a bit more on the realistic side of things. You get to play as a United States federal agent. His name is Gabe Logan. And him, along with a couple of other characters, Leon Zing. You're basically, the series starts off, you're going after this terrorist who is in possession of a biochemical virus called Siphon Filter. The name of the series is named after the virus. And it doesn't turn people into zombies. In fact, it's a weapon, so it's used to kill very quickly.
So it's a bionically engineered virus. All right. So
It doesn't turn you into zombies or big hulking tyrants or nemesis.
so
or...
so it liquidates your internal organs in like 5 seconds or something like that.
The end. It's a weapon. It's not, ooh, let's make zombies out of this. No, it's a... So
it's like a biological Metal Gear.
Metal Gear.
Metal Gear.
The story is a lot more realistic than what you would find in Metal Gear. However, with Siphon Filter does lack the major plot twists that Kojima is known for.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun, and the game, while you can choose to play stealthy, that doesn't have like the same sort of alert, caution, evasion setup that Metal Gear Solid has. You see enemies on a screen. They don't particularly have a line of sight. They just, if you are on the same screen as them, they see you. And there is actually a bar in the upper left corner of the game in the heads-up display that increases the more they see you. As the bar increases, it means a more likely of a chance that their gunfire will hit you.
Huh.
And so when that bar is full, it pretty much means that every one of their every one of their bullets is going to hit you. You need to get out of their sight immediately.
Weird.
And you've got an immense range of weaponry. My personal favorite is the taser, because it can become a lethal weapon. So if you see somebody off in the distance and your taser has such excellent range, you get a lock on. You lock on an enemy with a taser, and then you hold the fire button. After about 10 seconds of an enemy getting tased, they actually ignite.
Oh, no. That's awesome.
They actually ignite. So, and it goes through 3 games, and the story kind of... I think the best way to compare it to is as the story progresses, it kind of becomes like a police procedural documentary along the lines of, say, NCIS or CSI, those type of television shows. But it spans 3 games, and I think it does it really well. After it jumps onto the PS2 and later the PSP, the games kind of drop off in quality. But
how big of a drop are we talking? Are we talking like gradual turn to shit, or are we talking nosediving off the Grand Canyon?
This was one of those instances where, again, the studio, like 989 and a couple of the other studios working on Siphon Filter, eventually go belly up, and then Sony buys them.
Okay. So this is a case of new publisher not knowing how to handle the franchise.
Yeah, it's new blood.
And also a lot of things that ended up getting ported to redirected to the PSP. I don't know, the PSP has always seemed like a dead end to me. In terms of games that go there, they go there to die or something.
Yeah, they kind of go to the die, but it does have its moments, and graphically, again, doesn't really hold up, because, again, holy polygons in some places. And you have a free-swinging camera. So there's a couple of places where the camera angle gets you. Because there are areas of the game that you need precision. And from the way your character has to face in some areas, it could mean that the camera makes it so that you think, oh, I have to clear this, gap, otherwise I'm going to fall and die, or I need to jump and grab onto this ledge, but I missed it because the camera dictated otherwise, and you're dead.
That's the worst.
Luckily, each level, because each is loaded with checkpoints. It's a type of game where you start a level with the main objective, and as you're progressing through, a billion more objectives get added. With most of them being mandatory to progress through the level. Some of them are optional. And you'll gain additional weaponry or, defensive stuff if you do those optional ones. So, but I thought it was pretty memorable because, again, this was this was their answer to Metal Gear Solid, and it's a nice departure. Again, it's not the incredibly narrative-heavy drama, I guess, is probably the best word for it, that Metal Gear Solid is known for. And because this was made by an American studio, it doesn't have the Japanese trope of dialogue where everything is repeated in the form of a question.
Yeah.
And it was nice and refreshing. I mean, it was a serious game, but you didn't really need to think too heavily. It wasn't so plot heavy where you had to remember what was going on in the story, otherwise you'd lose it, because Siphon Filter also gave you plot synopses of what had happened. Every time you say you left the game, you shut the PS1 off, and you went back to the game, you loaded the game, you would get... It
did previously on Siphon Filter?
It was a couple of screens of text, but yes.
That's actually kind of good, because of... Maybe not for shooting games like that, but like I remember that I think Xenoblade did that.
Yes.
For its game, and that's a game that definitely needed it. Holy crap!
For as long as Xenoblade was, yes, absolutely. But Siphon Filter did that too, and so you didn't have, you didn't have these long dramatic codec conversations. Long-winded plots. There was no point in Siphon Filter where I broke down in a gibbering wreck, just sobbing because story and angst and, my god, these poor characters. Which was great in Metal Gear Solid, but for Siphon Filter, it wasn't necessary, and it was easier on the brain. So that is, I think we've pretty well covered it, gentlemen, unless you really want to insert some very quick honorable mentions here before I end this.
Nope.
Nope.
I can't think of anything either. I think the other thing I really want to say concerning the PS1 in general was this was a console that a lot of developers, a lot of publishers, a lot of people took this as a chance to experiment, because it was their first real foray into the 3D realm, and a lot of good stuff came out of it. We talked a lot about games that did good, and there's a lot of stuff that was really, really bad, really, 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 really bad,
really bad, really.
What? Why did you even make this back in 1999 bad? But I really do want to see more experimentation and risk-taking from studios. I know why they don't today, just because of cost of production and things like that. But back then, it seemed to be a lot easier to do compared to the multi-billion-dollar industry that video gaming is now.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I don't know that there's a lower percentage of shitty games that are put out now. It's just they're shitty games with no particular degree of innovation at the same time. You can certainly fault those old companies for having bad premises or poorly executed games, but
or putting out 5 million copies of a game at full price.
Yeah, they weren't just
Capcom.
oh, well, this was successful. for all the other people, so let's do it and, ride that cash cow. They're like, okay, what can we do? And of course that's never gonna be that's not always gonna be successful, but I'm glad they tried, even though they sometimes failed spectacularly, because it formed all the video games that have come since.
And just to put some numbers out there, it was this system, the PS1. It was released in Japan December 1994. It came out in North America September of 1995. So this is the 20th anniversary of the North American release of the PlayStation 1.
It still blows my mind that it's that old.
It sold over 102 million units. And like I said, it was the first PlayStation in Japan, December 3rd, 1994. It was discontinued March 31st, 2006.
Damn.
So, 12 years.
Yeah, almost 12. That's when production of the PS1 finally came to an end. So
I think production of the PS2 ended 2013?
I was gonna say
that was
last
close,
year
yeah.
or something.
It was close.
Yeah.
So
I really admire that business model that you guys talked about a bit in the last episode or two about how Sony is in it for the long haul. They are already out with the PS4, but they're still developing PS3 games.
That's Sony's new business model because that's how they see themselves making money, and they're right.
They're right,
yeah,
and yeah,
it's absolutely right.
That's one of the things I really like about Sony is that when a new system comes out, they want their customers to buy the new system. That's obvious, and there's money to be made there. But at the same time, they know that their customer base can't, many of them can't afford the new console right out of the gate, and also they know that, yes, we have this brand new console, but there's still a fuck ton of great games out there on the previous console. Go get them!
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that they do far better than Nintendo, and I hate that Nintendo's business model is as soon as the next console comes out, the old one is immediately dead.
Yeah.
Microsoft does that too.
Yeah. Full stop, dead. Nothing. I'm like, not everyone can jump right to the new console launch. I don't have I don't have $400 just lying around. It's like
Sony has admitted on multiple occasions that for the PS1 and PS2 they were developed on a 6 to 7 year plan, in that they foresaw people playing games and developing games for these consoles for 6 to 7 years before the hardware could be like technology could advance so that the next generation could come. When the PS3 came out, they said they're progressing to a 10-year cycle because, again, Sony foresaw that, hey, there's going to be a slowdown in the technology production just because of literal physics saying we can't get smaller.
Yeah.
Until we figure out that actually we can. We just need to do very, very specific things. And the PS3 came out 2005.
Well,
2006.
To go back to the earlier point, 2006, the PS3 came out.
Okay.
The PS2, which we will be talking about in 5 years for its 20th anniversary, if downloadable content goes that long. The PlayStation 2 came out in Japan March 4th of 2000, and it was discontinued January 4th, 2013.
Yeah, so 13 years for the PS2 almost.
So at the current rate, we have at least 2 more years of PS3 to look forward to.
Yeah, and generally speaking, from my understanding, only now are there going to be actual limitations on games made for between PS3 and PS4. Like, for example, Guilty Gear XRD. The only differences between the two is that the PS3 version is 720p, PS4 version is 1080p. There are going to be graphical limitations now because of hardware limitations on the PS3 compared to the higher hardware scaling on the PS4.
Yeah, we're starting to get right around that now.
Yeah, so backwards compatibility will probably be dropping off soon if it doesn't happen already on PS3 games. So I would suspect that most games that are not AAA are going to be made for PS4 exclusively, or PS4, Xbox One, PC multi-platform, because hey, let's get our money wherever we can.
Yeah, it's starting to reach that point. I mean, obviously, it's very late in the PS3's cycle, so yeah, we're going to start seeing that drop off. So I think we give the PS3 another 1 or 2 years before Sony finally says, all right, we're good.
We'll give us software updates, things like that. We'll set the PlayStation Network for it, but we won't be encouraging developers to publish on the PS3.
Well, eventually Sony's going to stop making PS3.
Yeah, I mean, eventually they're going to stop making it too, but I suspect they'll stop making them probably in 2017, assuming sales of the PS4 don't pick up.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So, I mean, the long and the short of it is that the PlayStation 1 was a profoundly influential system, and Sony's first real entry into the video game console market was a winner.
If the PS1, like Sony's first at bat, home run. PS2, like home run out of the park into the next stadium. PS3's a double. And as things stand, the PS4 is looking to be another home run.
Yeah, at the current moment. So Sony, yeah, go on, dude.
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of the PS3, calling it a double, I think probably at release, yes, a double, but in terms of getting video game consoles into, our current generation, a hell of a lot more than the 360 in terms of incorporating better with the exception of the blackout month or whatever, better on integration, utilization of more, using Blu-ray capability and all that other stuff. It had a hard time with the launch because it was so expensive because of the backward compatibility that you guys talked about before.
Yeah,
but I think there are a hell of a lot of great games that are. I just recently counted all the games I've ever beaten, and I've played more games to completion on PS3 by far than any other one, and that kind of surprised me, but there are a ton of great games. And just to jump slightly, I wanted to mention really fast that the thing that blows my mind is the electronics division of Sony has they've recently suggested, it's great and all that Sony, you guys make these PlayStations and everything, but you don't even make a profit overall if you incorporate all of the things in your electronics division. The electronics division actually loses them money, although the PlayStation branch of that is profitable. Their mobile branch and most of their other things aren't really quite as lucrative for them. Their big thing is financial services. In Japan and just in general, 2/3 of their profit and their revenue, I believe, comes from financial services. And the fact that they're still willing and, obviously it's more than just a financial decision if their electronics division is not lucrative to just continue churning that out. And I really admire that, that they're not just jumping ship or anything,
For that specifically, the electronics division of Sony normally doesn't make a huge profit. What they are selling is brand loyalty more than anything else, and that is what is like most people are buying Sony for nowadays. Is they're slowly becoming like an Apple of sorts, where you're paying a little bit extra for the Sony brand name, and usually I would argue not as good quality as like an Apple product in terms of like durability and things like that.
Right.
But it's still pretty good technology overall.
Yeah.
Sony has admitted that they're willing to operate at a loss on the PS3 or on the PS4 production. They're like I said before, they're operating on a 10-year plan, in that they're willing to operate at a loss on years 1, 2, and 3 if they eventually will turn a profits in years like 4 through 10.
And I really kind of admire that business model and the way they've been able to make it last, at least thus far. Like you guys have already said plenty of times, when other companies just abandon their consoles right away when they release a new one, it just seems kind of like a cheat, So, props to Sony is, I guess, what we're all saying.
Yeah, that about sums it up. And, Nintendo, it's your fault. Just saying.
Yeah,
Microsoft, it's your fault too.
Well, no, if we're talking strictly
PlayStation... Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, if we're talking strictly PlayStation, Nintendo, you fucked up.
Yeah, and,
Origin stories.
If we have, if we're going back to the PlayStation 1, just remember, this all came about. Thank you, Nintendo.
Yeah. Imagine there's an alternate universe somewhere where Sony and Nintendo didn't have their breakup.
Yeah, their lovers tiff.
Yeah. Like, imagine for a moment having Final Fantasy VII on the Nintendo 64 or Metal Gear Solid on the Nintendo 64.
Yeah, well, remember, the PlayStation was going to be a disc-based add-on for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So, in a world where where Sony didn't get jilted by Nintendo, it's something like that. So,
imagine there's a world where you have Nintendo literally being the mega corporate super giant of the video game industry, where you have Mario, Sonic, Zelda, Samus, Final Fantasy, Metal Gear, Guilty Gear, Tony Hawk. What other games? Like name a game that isn't related to Xbox or Microsoft. Yeah, that isn't Halo. In this alternate universe, Nintendo could be the main console.
You could have Mario and Spyro in Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
But in one regard, though, I wonder whether that would have actually been a good thing or not, because if you have that complete dominance with no competitor to speak of who could even, hold a candle to you, then what's your incentive to continue innovating the way that Nintendo has?
I agree. I'm just saying, Nintendo shooting itself in the foot is actually a good thing for the video game industry as a whole. Yeah. Because it not only did it have Sony get into it, but Sony's practice of how they handle their game publishing, in the sense that you just paid Sony a small royalty and you could basically put whatever you wanted on the PlayStation, compared to Nintendo's at that point in time very strict quality control.
Very draconian control, yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you wanted to put a game on a Nintendo console, there were very strict rules that you had to follow.
Whereas with Sony, you pay a
See
royalty.
Mortal Kombat 1.
Yeah, whereas with Sony, you pay a royalty to Sony. You use a CD that Sony provides to you, and you basically pay Sony like pennies on the dollar for every CD you buy from them. And, like, that was it.
That was it. So, the long and the short of it, thank you, Sony, and thank you, Nintendo, for your sudden but your inevitable
sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Yeah, there we go. That was the line I was looking for. So,
You're son of an inevitable betrayal.
yes. All right. So there we are. Happy anniversary, PlayStation. And so, if you have any questions, thoughts on this episode or any other episode of downloadable content, or you guys, or any of you who have been listening to these episodes and have any other cool games from the PlayStation 1 era that you fondly remember, let us know. Facebook.com/DLContent, on Twitter at DLContent, on Tumblr, DLCpodcast.tumblr.com, or you can email us dlcontent1@gmail.com. And again, every single episode, yes, all 101 now, can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. And so it remains for me to thank Gabe and Ron for being on this episode. And with that, I am Brian. Have a good one, everybody.